We are here this morning with Bill Miller, who is the CEO of the American Gaming Association, a relatively new CEO of the American Gaming Association. And perhaps, Bill, we can start by allowing you to introduce yourself, tell us your story, and what attracted you to the AGA.
Well, thank you. First of all, thanks for spending the time with me this morning. This is a great job. This is a great industry. And I have pretty much worked in politics or advocacy my entire life. And so for me, I spent 13 years at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. In addition to being their national political director, I was the guy who created relationships with state and local chambers and all the associations. And so I got to know a lot of the associations, the people that lead the associations during that period of time. And I always thought, I'd like to run one of these associations, but I was pretty discerning in terms of what were the industries I liked, who were the people I really admired. And so then I went on and spent 6 years as the #2 guy at the Business Roundtable. Business Roundtable is a group of 204 Fortune 500 CEOs. Jim Murren was one of my bosses. Gary Loveman was one of my bosses from Caesars. Mark Frisoro, when he ran Hertz Thrifty, was one of the CEOs that I worked with. And so I've known the industry for a pretty long time from the outside. And when this opportunity came about, I said to myself, there are not too many of these associations that I'd like to run, but man, if I had an opportunity to run this one, I'd be excited.
You've been the CEO of AGA now for the better part of the year, I guess. What have you learned about this gaming industry? Perhaps some things that might have surprised you, and I gather from your tenor of your voice you're still excited.
Look, I'm more excited today than I was on the first day. And the first day was an exciting day. It was the day that the Department of Justice reinterpreted the Wire Act. So that was an exciting day. But I am excited because the more I learn about this industry, the more impressed I am, and the more I am excited to represent it. And the reason is because in the communities in which we operate, we are really well regarded. We are great partners. Obviously, there's nothing that is quite at the same scale as Nevada. But what we have seen is, as states have approved gaming across the country, we move into communities, and oftentimes those communities are told before we come that there's some stereotypes that exist that we have to work to overcome. This is an industry that sometimes, at least from political leaders, is still defined by television and movies of our past. And when we come into these communities, the reality is we're great job creators. We help civic-minded organizations. Our people are invested in the communities. We create great opportunities as gateways to the middle class and to great careers. And so what I've been most impressed with and most excited about is going out all over the country, from Oklahoma to Mississippi to Connecticut to California, and seeing the impact locally on the economies and where we are. And that's just, to be able to bring that back to Washington and amplify some of those messages is the most exciting thing for a guy who's an advocate, and that's really who I am.
Every new CEO brings his own personality and priorities to a company. Any changes that you see that you would like to affect in the AGA?
I think the AGA is a great organization. We've got great companies. We've got great tribal leadership. We have the core operators, the commercial operators. We've got tribal operators. We've got manufacturers. I think that the organization is really is foundationally well constructed. The three things that I talk about all the time are, number one, we need to do a better job of translating our support in the communities to our political influence up on Capitol Hill. And ultimately, the AGA is based in Washington, D.C. Our job is to make sure that those members of Congress and those senators understand the important value we create in the communities. Number two is sports betting. Sports betting is an incredibly exciting opportunity for us to increase are exposure to entirely new populations of people that might never walk into a casino floor, but they like to bet on sports. We need to make sure that we get it right, because we got new partners. We've got leagues and teams and arenas and states and regulators that don't have any experience with this, but we want to make sure that we give them the tools and that they recognize, yes, there's a great financial opportunity here, but there's also a great responsibility from, for our new partners that don't necessarily understand responsibility the way we do. And then finally is in the space of payments. I am a believer that this is the 21st century hospitality industry. We offer exciting opportunities for entertainment, technology, the best restaurants and the best entertainment. And yet when you go on the casino floor, the only way you can transact business is with cash. And that seems to be odd. And I think it is something that prevents us from fully modernizing the industry and moving away from some of those issues that may have colored and characterized the industry in the past.
You, on your website, you have 3 areas of priority. One you've touched upon, which is sports betting. 2 of the others are responsible gaming and cultivating champions.
Yeah.
Could you touch on those 2 topics?
Sure, I'll talk about the champions one first. I think that this is an industry that, and a trade association that for many, many years had the great luxury of one of the most powerful members of the United States government in Harry Reid. And if there was something that was negative to the industry, it would not take a lot of communication to make sure that Leader Reid recognized that this was against the industry's interests or for the industry's interests, and he could act upon it. The AGA doesn't have a Harry Reid anymore. But what we do have is we do have 43 states that have gaming in some form. We have our local support that is driven by our responsible activities in these communities. And where we have that, we have a whole lot of members of Congress. We have a lot of members of the House and a lot of members of the Senate. And they see it in their communities. And what we just need to do in developing those champions is, look, we're never going to replace Harry Reid, but our job is to create a chorus of individuals who, if and when some piece of federal legislation or some piece of negative tax legislation were to come that would be, to the detriment of the industry, we have a whole lot of people in a whole lot of places that are willing to stand up and say, you know what, in the town that I'm in, the congressional district that I operate in, Washington, Pennsylvania, I've seen what's happened in the Meadows with the advent of the Meadows Casino, with 1,100 people working there, and a whole array of economic activity that has created opportunities for small businesses. And when I talked to the fire chief who had bought 2 fire trucks because that casino's there, we have those stories. We're going to amplify those stories in Washington, and we're going to create a whole new array of congressional champions. On the RG side, look, I think about, this is a tough business to operate in. This is a tough business to get a license in. But in addition to that license that you apply for, you run through this rigorous process to get approved, ultimately, it's responsible gaming that is our license to operate in the communities. And if the communities didn't believe that, we wouldn't be sitting at the highest popularity that we've ever had as an industry. No one has a more strong vested interest in responsible gaming and gambling than our operators, because they know that if we do not commit to that our license to operate, not just our license to operate from the perspective of the regulator, but among the communities, is in jeopardy.
I guess the final question is on the future of the AGA itself. One of the things that we've seen is it started as sort of big gaming. It was started by several of the very large casino operators, and it's grown and become more diverse until now it represents a lot of different constituencies under the umbrella of gaming. And yet gaming, and you touched upon this earlier, is still changing rapidly. We now have people like sports data companies that are now involved in gaming. How do you see the AGA evolving in terms of its membership and its mission?
Well, I think I'm one of those people that believe that if you don't continue to evolve, you die, you become less relevant. It is really important for us to continue to be relevant to our members. I think that you have to look at the U.S. marketplace, as the U.S. market is a pretty mature market. There are not a lot of new opportunities. And so for us to stay relevant with our members, for us to think about what's the next 5 years, and I had the good fortune to be on to speak at the East Coast Gaming Congress in Atlantic City a couple months ago, and my chairman, Tim Wilmot of Penn Gaming, he said at his time on the stage, he said, the next 5 years in this industry will be more consequential and more challenging than the last 30. And so for us, as the guy who runs this trade association, that's a little bit scary, but it also means there's a lot of opportunities there. We've got all of these, as you said, we've got all these companies that have come over from Europe because of sports betting. They're, whether they're the data companies or whether they're mobile processing or payment processing. We're excited that they're here. We're excited that they see opportunities here. But we also want to make sure that we don't repeat some of the same mistakes that have happened in the UK or in Europe. And so, the responsible code, as we updated the AGA's responsible code of conduct to include sports betting, and then at the 1-year anniversary of the Supreme Court decision, we issued a code of responsibility as it relates to marketing and advertising, because we do not want to have the same overreach by the government that we've seen in Europe, and the best way to do that is self-regulation.
Bill, that's a great overview. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and enjoy being here.